Hey guys, it's Michael from the Grande Bande. I'm here to tell you about a new series we're starting this fall. Part educational, part interview, this series dives into how the performers you've seen on stage and screen got to where they are today. This series is designed particularly for students as they begin to determine their career. If you've ever wondered how our musicians navigated their musical path, this is the series for you. Thanks for watching and enjoy.
Okay, my name is Conor O'Brien, and I am a violinist, and in the context of La Grande Bande, I am a Baroque violinist. I was born in Dublin, in Ireland. I lived there until I was going to graduate school, and that's when I moved to the US. I did all my schooling, my primary education in Ireland. I did a diploma and an undergraduate degree in violin performance at the Royal Irish Academy of Music. And during one of the summers that I was there, I did a summer course, a summer festival. That's the word I'm looking for, in Chautauqua, New York. My teacher knew the teacher who was teaching at Chautauqua, and suggested I go there and study with him for the summer. So I did, and while I was there, I met the professor who was at University of Minnesota. So when I finished up my degree in Ireland, she had actually just been to visit us and give master classes in Dublin. Nice. And she suggested that I come over. She said she'd enjoy having me in her studio, and I was delighted at this. And I did my audition and moved over here. So I did master's and doctorate degrees at the University of Minnesota, again in violin performance. So a lot of performing, a lot of solo work, a lot of chamber music, that kind of thing. In Ireland, the primary school is 6 years, so essentially like first grade through sixth grade, we call it first class, second class, third class, etc. And then you go into secondary school, first year, second year, up through sixth year. So it's two groups of 6 instead of the grade school, elementary school, middle school, high school system here. But otherwise fairly similar structure. My secondary school, I actually went to a school that taught purely through Irish, so the Irish language being different to the English language. And so for my final 6 years of school, we learned every subject, including English, through Irish. We were punished if we were caught speaking English. I mean, it's pretty hardcore. And we only played Irish sports. Soccer was referred to as the foreign sport, and most kids in Ireland do play soccer, but in our school it was called the foreign sport. That's the system. You do 2 sets of exams, so we don't have the same idea of building a GPA, or maintaining a GPA as we do in the States here. You basically, all your marks, all your points are built off these exams that you take. So your very last 2 weeks in school as an 18-year-old, for example, are spent taking nationwide exams. So every student of that subject sits the same exam on the same day. And the universities, they assign a total amount of points for each course that you would want to do. So if you want to go into medicine, which you do immediately as an undergrad, you don't, it's different pre-med and undergraduate degrees and all that. But if you want to do medicine, they say you need this many points. If you want to do law, you need this many points. If you want to do music, you need very few points. So every subject is allotted 100 points. If you get an A+, which is anything between 95 and 100%, you get that 100 points. If you get a regular A, you get 90 or 95, etc. on down the list. And they count your top 6 subjects. So 600 is the most amount of points you can earn. And so then the things like medicine and law law and those are kind of higher end careers that you want to go into. Those tend to be, you need to get 585, 590, maybe even 600 points.
Sure.
You need to ace every exam.
Sure.
So it's a tricky system, because if you have a bad day on the day of the exam, that's your entire future is at stake. And a lot of people actually repeat their final year of high school or secondary school in an attempt to get better points the next year.
Okay.
If they have their heart set on being a medical doctor, for example, and they want those points, they'll go back and they'll repeat the entire year and take the exams the next year and hope to get a better points total. So for me, I did apply for several academic subjects, but I really knew that I wanted to do music.
Sure.
And so the points for that were very low, so that didn't really factor into my exams. I did well, but I didn't necessarily need to.
Sure.
And going into music school is more about having an audition and performing well.
Right.
And so that was more my pathway from school into college. Word has it that when I was 2 years old, I think, on New Year's Day, the Vienna Philharmonic in Austria always has a special concert of Strauss waltzes and things like that. It was on the television when I was 2, and apparently I just sat there in the middle of a crowded room, and I was just absolutely glued to it. So my parents got the idea that I was interested in music, and then I think I did some of these introduction to music kind of courses or classes. And then when I was 6.5, I started violin. I wasn't a terribly fast-moving student or violinist to begin with. I got more serious when I was a teenager.
Okay.
I switched violin teachers to somebody who was more somebody who was kind of producing the stronger students in Dublin.
Sure.
And she took me on, and that I kind of got a little bit more serious, and that then led to college and that kind of thing. But I played a little piano. That violin teacher I had when I was a teenager, her husband was a wonderful musician.
Sure.
A real all-rounder. And so I took piano lessons with him for about 1.5 years, and he taught me a little bit of piano, but most weeks I would come in with questions about other things, and he would totally entertain whatever I brought in. If I had a question about composition, he'd grab some manuscript paper and we'd work on composition. We talked about arranging. We talked about figured bass, which is a big thing for harpsichordists. And so I did a little bit of tinkering around with learning how to read figures and what we call realizing a bass line, right?
Yep, that's where you got the little numbers, and then you play notes above it. That's kind of what it is, and that's like a short and dirty version of it. But
so that was really fun for me, more than learning how to play the piano. I didn't really learn much repertoire on the piano, but it was a really interesting time because he was just a fascinating guy, and any question I had, he had really interesting stories or insight into these different interests, and that was really fun. And so I would go after school. I'd take the train to their house, and I'd have my violin lesson, and then my violin teacher would bring me in a cup of tea and a coffee cake or something, and then I'd have my piano lesson, and then head home. So it was an intense afternoon once a week, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. Sure. So preparing an audition to go to college to study music, they will usually prescribe some rough guidelines for you. They might say you need to play 2 contrasting pieces. You might need to play some scales. You might need to do some sight reading. And in terms of the repertoire, contrasting pieces, you want to think about what showcases you're playing the best. So it could be that you play a fast piece and a slow piece. It could be that you play a piece of Baroque music from the 1700s and you play a piece of contemporary music from 2 years ago.
Sure.
It could be that you play one of your own compositions. It could be that you take music from different countries. Maybe with some folk elements, and maybe a piece of Hungarian music is remarkably different to a piece of American music or a piece of Irish music.
Sure.
So that's usually, I think, an undergraduate audition. It's fairly standard to need 2 pieces. For more advanced degrees, I think the audition process tends to be a little bit more thorough, and they might require a movement of solo Bach. They might say you have to play a movement of a Mozart concerto, you have to play a romantic concerto, which is more in line with professional auditions. If you were to audition to have a job in an orchestra, for example, you're always going to have to play a movement from a major romantic concerto. You have to add a movement of a Mozart violin concerto, and you might have one other piece. Maybe solo Bach is
pretty standard, right?
That too. Pretty standard for the violin. From masters to DMA, I did them at the same school, so I don't remember actually doing a separate audition. I think in maybe in one of my juries, I was told that, if I do well in the jury, they'll just accept you onto the DMA.
Sure.
If you were doing it at different schools, I imagine you'd need to prepare a program of 2 or 3 or maybe even more pieces for a doctoral audition. But if you do them at the same school, they tend to roll from one into the other.
Right. Yeah, that's how it was at Stony Brook too. I just had to fill out a piece of paperwork, and it was basically, some of the studios did have the auditions, but most of it was just like a piece of paperwork, and then you just kind of transition from one degree to the next.
And the thing is, you're performing anyway. I mean, part of my master's was I had to give a full-length recital.
Yep.
So I mean, if you can take the repertoire that you've already learned for that and play it in an audition, or submit a recording of that recital for the audition. So oftentimes it's not something separate that you have to prepare.
Sure.
Which is nice.
Yeah, exactly. So you talked a little bit about festivals before too. Did you do a lot of festivals like in between grad school or during grad school, or I mean, how did that type of education, like outside of grad school?
Actually, I did very little of that. I did Chautauqua was when I was an first year undergraduate student.
Sure.
Other than that, I did a few other summer things while I was still living in Ireland. I spent a couple of summers in Italy working with the same teacher that I'd met in New York.
Okay.
And then when I moved here, my professor did some kind of a summer course that I participated in the first year, but I didn't travel the country playing festivals.
Okay.
I had been freelancing professionally in Ireland for several years during my undergraduate degree. I played with the National Symphony Orchestra, a couple of other orchestras there, and other chamber music work and things like that. So when I moved over here, I was keen to keep that up and try to get paid performance work here. Right. So the summers were kind of part of that for me.
Sure.
There tended to be some more sub work, like for example with the Minnesota Orchestra.
Oh yeah.
In the summers, because some of their players took off for a few weeks and they had more need for substitute players. Right. So I guess I prioritized that kind of work over going to festivals to do more learning. I'd done my diploma, which was a 1-year course, a 4-year degree, then a master's, and then a doctorate. It's a lot of school. Kind of done with I wanted to do something different, I guess.
Sure. Do you think that in like general advice, is it better for students to try to find like more professional work rather than going to some of these festivals if they feel like their level of skill is up to that point? Or do you think the festivals have a benefit?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that's a very individual choice.
Okay.
Going to festivals and doing things like that creates wonderful memories and great connections, both professional connections and friendships and things like that. Yeah. You might meet a teacher there that you end up studying with for a degree later on. You might make friends there that you form a chamber music group with and play together with for the rest of your life. Or you might just rather get into the workplace and get kind of the work experience. So it's for me, I felt like I'd done several festivals and things like that, and I wanted to be working more, and I'd just gotten used to that back home. So yeah. Before the pandemic, I'm a very busy freelance musician, which is a wonderful thing to say, because when you're freelance or self-employed, you want to be busy, right? You want to have work. I am a first violinist with the Minnesota Opera Orchestra. We do normally 5 productions a year. And a production involves a couple of weeks of rehearsing and then 1 or 2 weeks of performing every other night. And I love operatic repertoire. That's a lot of fun. I play a lot of early music, so music from the Baroque period. I play with Lyra Baroque Orchestra, probably 2 of their programs each year.
Which is based in St. Paul, right?
Which is based in St. Paul. The Bach Society of Minnesota, I've been playing more with them the last few years as well. So I do a couple of programs with them each year. The Grande Bande has been doing more and more stuff the last couple of years. That's been a lot of fun. And then there's a church in Minneapolis that does Bachtage, Mount Olive Lutheran Church. And that's always been on period instruments with a choir. And it's like a sign up. I think people just sign up for the weekend. They study 2 or 3 works. And on Sunday we perform with them. So there's a little orchestra of all Baroque instruments, and we play Bach. So Bachtage literally means Bach days. And it's just 3 days of work. And Kathy Romy, who's the head of the choral department at the U of M, she is usually the conductor, and I would play anything that Kathy Romy is conducting. I love working with her.
She's great.
It's always a real learning experience with Kathy. She studied in Germany a lot. She has a very dear affinity for Bach and Bach's music, and so that's always a highlight as well. So that's the early music side. In the summer, I play with the Minneapolis Pops Orchestra. We play outdoor concerts at the Lake Harriet Bandshell. I also play with the Mill City Summer Opera, which up until last year staged an outdoor opera in the ruins of the old Mill City Museum, which was an old mill by the Mississippi River that had a big gas explosion and left this courtyard in ruins, basically. And so they built a platform for the orchestra up by the back wall. And if you look through the window, the Mississippi River is just down beneath you, which is really cool. You can just hear the current all the way through the opera. And then they build a stage in amongst kind of the gravel and the rubble. And then they put chairs out, so it's a very intimate setting for opera. I like to think of it as the Verona of the Twin Cities, the famous outdoor amphitheater where they do opera. In northern Italy, and so that's another really interesting gig. I run a string quartet. We do recital performances. We also do performances for weddings and events and things like that. But I manage that, so that's a lot of kind of computer time and phone calls and things like that. And I know I'm missing something. I teach. So I have done the kind of university professor thing. I was on faculty at Luther College for a little bit and Gustavus Adolphus College for some years. Now I have a private teaching studio at home, and I teach a mixture of some committed youngsters and then many adults. That's it's a lot, and every day is different.
Sure.
I might start the day working on some quartet business, and then
Right.
I moved to practicing for an opera or going to a rehearsal for some chamber music, or
Sure.
So I really like that because it keeps things fresh.
Right.
I'm playing different music all the time. I'm working with different people all the time.
Right.
It's actually quite a social career. So
Right.
then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And on one day in March, I think it was the 13th or something, emails just started pinging on my computer, and it was all the jobs that were canceling for, for the rest of the summer. And
right.
And that's kind of continued through the fall. We've done some online performing, but almost nothing in person.
Sure.
And I really miss the audience. I miss my colleagues. I miss the process of rehearsing and putting together a program and playing chamber music. If I'm totally honest, I miss it more than I thought I would.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. It's really weird to not have that, you know, because you get so used to being able to do those things, and then to not have it is just, it's hard.
The engagement with an audience, like we've done some performing online, so I'm performing with a few people.
Yeah.
But there's no audience. We're performing for the video camera.
Right.
And why is that different? Well, it's different because there's no audience. There's no interaction.
All right.
And we think of an audience as sitting over there and the performers as being over here, but there's kind of unspoken interaction. You can sense people breathing. I mean, you might get a little sigh at the end of a sad piece or something like that. And those almost unspoken interactions are very palpable, and they're a very integral part of performing. And I'm just starting to notice that more and more by missing it.
For sure.
So I think I'm dying to get back to work, back to playing, back to performing, and back to getting that feeling of communicating with people again.
Right.
I really miss that. I think to try lots of things.
Sure.
I mean, I work in music, but within the field of music, there's so many different things to do. And what I love about my career now is that I do so many different types of things. When I was younger, I signed up to volunteer at a music festival, pouring glasses of wine for the intermission, right? Or setting the chairs on the stage, or opening the piano lid, and things like that. And I really enjoyed that time, and that got me an insight into what goes into putting on a performance, aside from the performers and the practice that goes in, or the rehearsing. There's all these logistics, and I really enjoyed getting to know what goes on behind the scenes. We take for granted when we go to a concert that the piano is on the stage. Well, how did the piano get on the stage? So I think I really enjoyed trying lots of different things, and you might find that there's one of those elements that you really love, and you focus on that, and that becomes your absolute primary goal. Or you might find that you want to do different things and have that diversity that I really enjoy. And so I think that would be my something that I did a little of, and maybe I could have done more of. But it definitely stuck with me, and I would advise all young musicians to try. So that means like play different types of repertoire. If you really love Baroque music, that's super, but try playing a piece of contemporary music. Try playing something romantic, a very different style to playing Bach or Handel or Corelli. Or like try doing some of the organizing work and see if you like that. You know, the best organizations have people in all the different jobs that they have. They're all people who understand music really well. Right. So if you look at, say, the Minnesota Orchestra, the personnel manager or the stagehands or the marketing people, they have to have an understanding of what goes into an orchestra. What goes
Right.
into every musician? How
Sure.
did they get here? And if you're a musician yourself, a high school student, for example, and you're playing an instrument and you're studying, you can bring that expertise to being a performer, but you can also bring that expertise to other sides of the music business, and it'll be incredibly valuable that you understand what it is to be a performer, but that might not be your main job.
Right. That there's more choices to being a musician than just being just being a performer.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. And we need people in all these jobs,
right,
who understand what the music business is all about.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with anybody, like a cool fact or anything like that?
A cool fact?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that I have any cool facts.
What's your favorite, like, Irish sport? You said that Irish sports.
Well, so we have Gaelic football and we have hurling.
Oh.
And hurling is the fastest ball game in the world. I think ice hockey might be faster, but it's technically not a ball game.
Sure.
But and we call it ice hockey because hockey in my part of the world means field hockey.
Gotcha.
So Gaelic football is a mixture between soccer and basketball.
Okay.
15 players on a team instead of 11 in the case of soccer, or 5 on a basketball team.
Yeah.
But you can hold the ball in your hands, and as you run down the pitch, you can't take more than a few steps without either kicking the ball back into your hands,
Gotcha.
so you drop it and kick it back up,
Yep.
which is called soloing, or bouncing the ball. So the bouncing part is kind of basketball related.
Right.
You are trying to score in a goal, which is soccer related.
Sure.
And goals look, it's like a soccer goal with American football high posts.
Gotcha.
Above the crossbar. So if you get it above the crossbar but between the posts, you get 1 point. And if you get it in the goal, you get a goal, which is worth 3 points.
Cool.
And hurling works the same way as well. So the same positions on the field, 15 players, except you're hitting a hard leather ball with a stick made out of ash, and that's called the hurl. So the ball is interesting. It's really hard, and it's a leather ball, but instead of having the seam, instead of, with a baseball, for example, the material is folded in and the stitching is on the outside. With a Schlither, which is the name of this ball, it goes the other way. So the material comes up.
Interesting.
And it's thick leather, and then it's sewn on the outside, so it has these ridges on the outside.
Okay.
I got hit in the head one time with a Schlitzer. I was foolishly standing in goal, and somebody took a shot, and it was so fast, and it just hit me on the side of the head, knocked me over. I mean, it was incredibly sore.
Painful.
But it's really fast, and it's a fun game. So if you're curious, my county, Dublin, is the current Gaelic champion, and I have to say I didn't watch the hurling last year, and I can't tell you off the top of my head who the champion is, but it's a fun game to watch. Very fast. So go on YouTube and look it up.